Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back. It is somewhere in the middle of the first round of what I think is probably the craziest NBA playoff first round series that we've ever had in the history of the sport that I can remember. They went to this format in 1984, and there have been some fun ones. But, I mean, Cody, I was just trying to think about, like, today, 2023, cover yours for a second. The Bucks and the Heat, that was crazy. And then the Golden State Warriors, they had this awesome series against the Sacramento Kings. And it was really fun that the Lakers and the Grizzlies, Lakers all of a sudden look like they're a much better team. And I don't think there were too many other things going on. And right now we have like 6 series that are fantastic. There's literally too much basketball. I don't even know where to begin.
I know where to begin, because a fun PSA that I think we send out every playoffs is that the plural of series is in fact series, right? So anyone that wants to talk about multiple of the series that are crazy, you can just say that many of these series are crazy, right? It's like, I know, listen, growing up in the Northwoods, in the middle of the woods, you always hear like fish is the plural of fish. But if you get into some textbooks, some like hoity-toity person's like, it's fishes. Nope. Fish can also just be the plural of fish. So that's obviously where we have to start today, is with that grammar. And the only reason we start there is, I don't know about you, Ben, but I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from watching the boxing match that is the Orlando Magic versus the Detroit Pistons. And I know you're usually the one that's going to point us in a direction to go, but that is the only thing that's at top of mind, because I know you and I were live chatting about it with some other Thinking Basketball people, and I just cannot believe the physicality and the spacing and just the unbelievable fight that an 8 seed is putting up against a 1 seed and has that 1 seed on the ropes right now. So I feel like that's got to be where we start today.
I do want to start there. I have a lot to say about this game. I have a lot to say about this series, but I don't want to do the thing where we bury our lead. And I was thinking about this right before we recorded. The lead to me is that these bad matchups in the playoffs break people's brains. They just completely break the basketball sphere's brains. Fans, analysts, they lose their mind. And there's 2 of them going on right now that I want to talk about today. One of them is Nikola Jokic versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a matchup that we've earmarked as a problem for them for years, and we'll get to that later. But the Pistons and the Magic is not only a bad matchup for the Pistons, but it is just a fascinating series top to bottom, because in addition to the matchup, I'll talk about what's going on with the matchup in a second. But in addition to the matchup, Cody, Orlando has gotten healthier. They have Jalen Suggs, who's missed a lot of time. And the key one is Franz Wagner, who has been massive in this series. And so you have a team that is a much better team than a typical 8 seed, probably the more talented team. They're literally more talented than the Pistons as a 1 seed, however we want to define basketball talent, because part of the last thing that's happened with the Magic this year is they've had this very mercurial season with the injuries and the moodiness and the roles and what's going on with the coaches, and they're losing, they're not even going to make the play-in, and they were fumbling themselves out of the play-in, and they're losing to the Celtics 3rd stringers on the last day of the year. And then they were just like, we had enough. I don't know if they had to win one for the Gipper or whatever. They came out, they smashed Charlotte. They go into this series, and with Franz, with Jalen Suggs, playoff Jalen Suggs, with Desmond Bane, they have swagger. They have legitimate swagger. And Wendell Carter Jr. has basically playing the best basketball I think he's played. It's been key to some of the dynamics of the matchup that we'll talk about in a second. And then the offense, because they're healthier, there's less of sort of the bad Paolo Banchero that we've lamented so much over the years on this show. I know in game 4, I think he finished 4 for 18 or something in game 4, but I just think he's been much better throughout the series in terms of finding a balance within the other players playing within the offense, within the Magic, having sets and not completely getting bogged down in isolation ball. And Detroit is a very good defensive team, and Orlando's done enough to score more points than them, which is the moral of the story. So, and I'll tell you how they've done that in a second. It's fascinating. It's not necessarily what you think, but that's the place I want to go, because I've seen between Jokic and between the Pistons, I mean, I just think everybody's losing their marbles about like, you know, the Pistons are fraud. The team is terrible. They're the worst 60 team ever. And to me, this is what a unique matchup does to our minds as fans. And it's just, there's so much to dig into.
As an analyst here, I can have it both ways here. So whichever way you want to give me credit, you can. Because at the beginning of the season, in our preview pod, I know for a fact that I said that I wouldn't be shocked if Orlando made it to the finals, right? But then during the playoff preview pod, I think we laughed off Orlando. I don't even think there was a conversation about the possibility of that matchup. I think even because we didn't talk about it before until after the play-in games, like before the play-in games, I should say. So in my mind, I was like, oh, the Pistons are probably going to be facing the Hornets. Like that was what I had going into the series. So I've had both takes here. So let's just cut our losses and say that I was right about the Orlando Magic here. But yeah, I think your point though that's interesting is anyone that says that like the Detroit Pistons are frauds. Exactly what we predicted would be their Achilles heel during the playoffs is what has been their Achilles heel. And it's their lack of shooting, it's their lack of spacing, their inability to execute beyond having like Cade Cunningham do stuff, maybe Dennis Jenkins coming in for a spell or two and doing some stuff. But the thing that people aren't saying, as you just said, is that Orlando is one of the better 8 seeds that we've seen, right? Because they're not actually an 8 seed, right? If we took what everyone thought of Orlando before the season, this is closer to that iteration of the Magic than what we saw. And at the end of the day, that's probably closer to a 3 seed. 2 seed, 4 seed, whatever it was that they were last year. So, you know, is this disappointing for the Pistons? And is this going to help Detroit fans now that they're down 3-1? No, it's not. This is just a really unlucky draw of the cards to pick up an 8 seed. That is honestly a lot better than this play-in performance that we saw during the regular season.
And that's what's so fascinating about the psychological element or about the way we talk about the sport as fans. If this happens in the second round to a 4-seeded Orlando team that won 53 games and Franz missed the end of the year and then they came back and people were like, oh, the Magic are dangerous, we wouldn't have this reaction. You know, there's a lot of 1 seeds that we know have been somewhat shaky in terms of their playoff look, right? Not their regular season, but going in last year, we had it with the Cavs. There was a lot of controversy about how much sort of playoff equity we should give the Cavs team, and they lose in the second round. We've seen it before. The 2015 Atlanta Hawks are always brought up and things like that. But for me, if you're a really good 1 seed, a really good regular season team, and you get to a point, whether it's the second round or the third round in your conference, and you have to play another championship level team, that's where the rubber meets the road. And what we're kind of saying is like, in some sense, this has happened in the first round for just mitigating circumstances, you know, like what do they put in the contracts? Like the act of God, you know, just like random sort of things that have happened to set up the Pistons. Because in addition to what we said about the Magic, you talked about the shooting, you talked about the spacing. Orlando is a big, big physical team. Detroit, punks teams. We've talked about this all year. They are very, very physical. They use their size and strength on both sides of the ball to force a lot of turnovers and win the rebounding margin. And the possession game, getting more shots at the goal from winning the turnovers, from winning the rebounding battle, has been huge to the Pistons' success all year. They have been the number 1 team in the league in net shots, net true shots. By true shot attempt, we mean a field goal attempt, or if you get fouled on a 2-shot attempt or a 3-shot attempt. They have been first in the league all year. It's been a key to them winning basketball games. Cody, the Detroit Pistons 16 times this year had a worse true shooting percentage than their opponent and won the game. In 16 games, they were outshot efficiency-wise, but they just got more shots because they're like, we're gonna muck you up. We're going to turn you over. We're going to get all the boards. We're going to get all over the offensive glass. Our trade-off for a lack of spacing is we're going to take Jalen Duren and we're going to take Asar Thompson and we're going to keep him near the basket a lot and crash the glass, right? That's how we're going to generate these extra shots. You match up against a team like Orlando that is giant and also is good in those areas, and you have a problem with that dynamic. And so I just told you Detroit won an incredible 16 games, most in the league this year, where they were outshot by their opponents. The Orlando Magic were second. They won 14 games where they were outshot by their opponents. So this is in so many ways a really, really, really poor matchup for Detroit, where the kind of secret sauce that the Pistons have had is being dissolved before they can even, get the dish in the pan, if I'm going with a food metaphor here.
Something else that I wanted to float by you here, and maybe we've touched on this conversation before, but I'm thinking about it more and more as I see these teams bring out their bench players to play some. Are just players, like if you were to rank the players, are players 60 through 100 or like 70 through 120 or something like that? Are they just closer than they've ever been before? Because I feel like at a certain point you could be like the top 100 players, and then there's a clear demarcation after that, and then you have a bunch of guys that are unplayable. But it seems like the end of a lot of these teams' benches are players that can come in and really swing a game. Jamal Cain right now is 9th in the Orlando Magic's total playoff minutes. Right? 9th. He came in and just swung the fourth quarter yesterday. Right? You talk about what the Pistons are able to do to win the physicality battle, win the possession battle, and things like that. Cain went in there and is like, hey, everyone, I know you're having a physical game. I'm going to show everybody up right now. I'm going to lock down everyone. I'm going to sky for incredible rebounds. I'm going to posterize Jalen Duren. Like, I don't know if people hang up posters anymore. I want that poster. I want the Cain poster because that was unbelievable. Like, he came down. I think he brings it down and just throws it straight over him. I haven't seen something that nasty in a really long time. But he's the 9th player. Goga Bitadze, the 8th player in their rotation, right? Does he have a lot of issues with lateral movement and defending in space? Absolutely. Is he protecting the rim like a monster? You better believe it. These are the 8th and 9th guys of the 8th seed, right? You go back to like 2005 or something like that, and you could bring up like the 9th player on an 8th seed. It's not going to be somebody that's getting rotation minutes. So that's something that I keep thinking about. Is just the quality of like the 8th and 9th player of every single team just seems to be so much better than we've been used to before.
That's a really interesting idea. We're going to have to explore that more. I was actually wondering, like, Cain's fourth quarter last night, I was thinking, does this work against teams that aren't this offensively deficient? Because you have this sort of Spider-Man meme going on with these two teams where they're pointing at each other. They're both super physical. They both can't score very well. So back to my point about breaking everyone's brains, Cody. Okay. If I asked you, if after this, like, we're 4 games into this series as of recording this, it looks like the Magic will probably win the series. If I had to pick, it looks like they're going to take it in 6, that kind of thing. It has that sense to it. But if I were to ask you, who's been the more efficient offense per chance in the series, what would you say?
The more efficient offense per chance. Man, it's really tough. I think by the way you're saying it, on one hand, I watch Cade, and he does bury a lot of these pull-up jumpers, and he's able to create the best with his passing. He's by far the best passer in the series that we've seen. So he's setting up some good shots for people. The Orlando Magic, like, they just go on stretches. Like, I think they start the first quarter. There's 5 straight plays where they force a turnover, right? And they go on these huge runs. And then all of a sudden you blink and the Pistons came back because they're like, oh, yeah, we forget how to score in the half court. So I'm actually going to say the Pistons on this one.
Yes, the Pistons have been more efficient with their chances. They are just getting crushed in the possession game. So Orlando's true shooting percentage in game 2, the game they lost by 15, was 44% as a team. Their true shooting percentage was 44%. In game 3, a game they won, it was 54%, but the Pistons was 56. They got 11 extra shots in that game, Cody. Okay. And in game 4, the Pistons, again, you look at the Pistons' true shooting percentage, you're like 46%. That's terrible. The Magic true shooting percentage in game 4, Cody, was 43%. It was 43%. They had 15 extra shots in the game, 15 more shots than the Pistons in the game. So again, the narratives will be written, but it's one of these things where one game, a couple plays, something, anything, Jalen Duren. If Jalen Duren could, maybe make a shot, or I don't know. I don't want to be too negative because to me, I've been concerned about Jalen Duren all year. But even for where I was, I don't remember what we ended up doing with him in the sub All-Star conversation, and I don't remember how that conversation went. I do remember expressing some concerns. This is like, it feels like beyond a Julius Randle thing, where Julius Randle, DeMar DeRozan, players like that, there's a certain amount of primacy that they couldn't hold. But this isn't holding primacy. This is like, when I watch the games, I'm like, okay, I don't know where Jalen Duren belongs in the rotation. So Isaiah Stewart last night, Cody, in game 4 of his playoff game, had 8 blocks in the game. Hit 8 blocks in the game. He played 17 minutes. He had a block every 2 minutes. Okay, so that is the fewest number of minutes ever played to block 8 shots in a playoff game.
Wow.
By far. The person behind him is at like 23 minutes, the second most minutes or second fewest minutes. And then there's only a couple other players ever who's done it in under 30 minutes. And he hit 8 blocks in 17 minutes. So, yeah, I have more to say about this game, but this is just an incredible series.
A couple of things to contextualize. I think you texted me that the Pistons had 18 blocks as a team, right?
Yes.
And so I ran to Basketball Reference and I looked up StatHead, and I didn't check to see how far back it goes. I think maybe it's as far back as blocks have been tracked. I don't know off the top of my head, but according to their database, that's the 3rd most blocks in a playoff game ever. Right. So we saw just a stifling performance. Now, obviously, Isaiah Stewart's a huge part of it. Right. Going to that true shooting percentage, those numbers that you said, the low 50s, the game the Orlando Magic lost was in the 40s, like 44. Just to contextualize that, the worst team in the NBA for true shooting percentage was the Sacramento Kings at 55.7%. And league average was like 57.8%. So if you're wondering how bad like a 44% true shooting game is, that's beyond anything that you should ever expect from a team that is about to knock out the first seed in the playoffs. Like that's really incredible stuff. Talking about Jalen Duren, I don't even know the correct entry point for this conversation. But I will say defensively, what's really interesting, because if you watch the box score and you see some of the highlights and things like that, you might watch and be like, Jalen Duren's having a huge impact defensively. And yes, granted, I think Jalen Duren is having an impact defensively. He's blocking a lot of shots. He's massive. People can drive in there, and he meets people at the apex and swats it out, and that has some value to it. But I think he's a really interesting case study between shot blocking skill and paint protection skill, which is what we talk about when we get to like the thinkies and break down some of the great paint protectors. Gobert will probably come up at some point here, but it's like the positional awareness aspect. Like one hand, you can chase to get a shot and get it out of there. And of course that saves a really high efficient shot. But some of the best ones are taking away that opportunity even in the first place. Like you're deterring the opportunity for a player to get down there, and then you're still able to get some of those shots. And that positional awareness defensively, I know we've talked about it during the season, and that's still coming up as you see him on some of these possessions. You're like, I'm not so sure if that's where you should be at this point, either on offense or defense. But I think some of that's being covered up by the highlight blocks that he's had.
Oh, it's such a great point. Am I having a large language model hallucination, or did we not do some member content on his positioning in pick and roll coverages and things like that? I swear we did this year.
I'm going to be honest with you. Like your members content has been on fire over on Patreon during the playoffs. Like you've released so much stuff that anything prior to this, like I could believe anything that you've said.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I thought we did something, but maybe we didn't. Yes, there are concerns there. And, in game 4, more physicality, more blocks, that's helpful. But to your point, if you're not, what you really want is to have the Pistons defense somehow be even better than the 44% we're seeing, because there's a trade-off that's taking place. And I think it trickles down to the way the team looks. And I think it trickles down to Cade Cunningham and the way people react. I have seen some comments about last night's game, which was it was like a finals game. It was a finals game, but it was also a finals game from the 90s because both teams don't have shooters. And the Pistons especially, we talked about this right after game 1, JB Bickerstaff's conundrum is, how do you put more shooters on the floor but not sacrifice too much defensively? And what that means is when you analyze a series like this and you look at the numbers we looked at and you look at Cade Cunningham's numbers and all that, you have to account for the reality that there is not good spacing or shooting on the court. Not good spacing or shooting. So it's just going to be gunky and ugly and mucky. I got the stats department on this. In the regular season, the average half-court possession, according to the cameras, was about 114 offensive rating. Okay, that's the way they define it. And in the postseason, it's down to 111. Maybe that's put a pin in that. We can come back to that. The playoffs have been more physical. Offense has been much harder to have, and this series is the epitome of it. And so when we zoom in on this series, we talked about this. The Pistons were like 10th in half-court offense during the season. The Magic were 18th. They were even worse, but not terrible. Okay, they're straddling. The Pistons are a little above average, and the Magic are a little below average, and things like that. Okay, Detroit's half-court offense in this series, when Asar Thompson is on the floor, is 98, I think. Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to guess what it is when Cade Cunningham goes to the bench?
Oh my God.
He's been on the bench for 55 possessions. This is the point. This is really what I want to hammer home to people. Like, the context of the war that we're watching, and to just simply react and go, both of these teams are terrible. They can't make a shot. No, they're just loaded up with defensive players out there. What is the offensive rating for the Pistons in the half court when Cade Cunningham's been on the bench this series?
See, this is always the fun part about stats in the first round, because I could say any number and it's a good enough guess, because you just get some wild outlier stuff. I don't want to be too wild though. I'm gonna have some fun. I'll just go down to 90. I'll say it's 90.
78. They cannot score when Cade Cunningham is on the bench in the half court. He's very small sample, but It is reflective. So like when he's on the court, it's like 100, which is terrible, but it's 100, and then it's like 78. Kind of reminds me of some of the old Kevin Garnett playoff series where, you're zooming out and you're going, the Wolves lost. Why'd they lose to the 1 seed champion Spurs? They had a 100 offensive rating. And then you like zoom out and you're like, they were outscored by 112 points per 100 when Kevin Garnett sat on the bench. They couldn't do anything. By the way, when Franz Wagner plays for the Magic, they actually have a decent half-court offensive rating. It's 105 in this series. This year, it's been 116 when they have Franz and Bane in the lineup. So I think getting Franz has been huge, and maybe there's some ramifications going forward for what that actually means for the Magic if they're healthy. But this series, Cody, has just been really, really something. To cap off that point about Franz, in the minutes he's played in this series, the Magic have a 110 offensive rating. And when he's been on the bench, they have a 95 offensive rating.
Wow. And I mean, there was a lineup they were running. I think it was maybe in the second quarter, but the Pistons just had I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these players. I actually really like a couple of these players, but it's Cade, LeVert, Asar Thompson, Javonte Green, Isaiah Stewart, right? And I know Isaiah Stewart might actually have like the second best 3-point percentage on the team. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I know he's knocked down a fair number of them compared to his compadres out there. But when you look at that, you're like, where's any spacing going to come from here, right? Like, I know LeVert has some offensive juice that he has when he has the ball, but when he's off the ball, he's not really bringing any value there. Asar, I mean, he just wants to hang out at the dunker spot and try and grab offensive rebounds. Like, he and Amen are very similar in that sort of thing, and he can just be left alone if he's on the perimeter. Javonte Green makes, once in a while, but he's, of course, not somebody you're going to defend. So I don't care who you are as a coach. Strategically, what are you going to do, especially when you're facing against a team that you can't just bully down low? I think we talked about it after game one, but Franz, like his size, he could just switch on to somebody like Duren, and you're like, oh, Duren, height-wise, length-wise, he doesn't really have anything on Franz. Like, obviously, the muscles look great and all, but Franz is a bulky dude. Banchero is a bulky dude. Suggs wants the smoke, right? Bane's going to start a fight out there if you try and barrel him down. So, I just don't know what you're supposed to do in this matchup if you are the Pistons. I'm not necessarily watching this performance and being like, oh, that Bickerstaff, he's a fraud. I don't know. What do you want him to do in this series? I think that's a big question that I have for anyone that wants to call the Pistons fraudulent.
Well, the roster is defensively oriented. So it seems to me like something you'd want to address at an organizational level before getting into the playoffs. But if I'm Bickerstaff, as I've said before, I do not think the two true non-shooters is a tenable approach. But more to the point of this conversation, the Magic, with how good they are defensively, are amplifying that weakness. And I think that's the thing that, like, I want to bookmark this conversation with about Orlando before we move on to the next point, Joker and Rudy Gobert. The next round, if the Pistons moved on to the next round, I don't see any evidence that the Toronto defense, Scotty Barnes, oh my God, or the Cleveland defense could be as this destructive to the Pistons spacing as what the Orlando Magic defense have been. And you called it out last week. The Magic have been a top tier defensive wrecking ball in the regular season when they've been healthy for the last couple of years. This is the first time we really haven't had it. And they've been re-unleashed to start this playoffs. Jalen Suggs is as healthy as he's been. And it's so interesting to go back to the first thing we talked about in this postseason, Jalen Suggs getting to be the one to roam off Asar Thompson, and just how destructive that is because of his speed. They're playing an Oklahoma City style gambit by usually you put the center on him or something like that. You put a shot blocker on him, and so he doesn't have to go out to the perimeter. This is a totally different thing. They're adding an extra defender to every action because Suggs just goes like a little zooms wherever he wants, just goes to the other side of the court. Wherever you're running the pick and roll, Jalen Suggs shows up. He's like the boogeyman. It's absolutely incredible. And there's no way that, I mean, can you think of someone on the Cleveland Cavaliers who can replicate that role? So it's just like, it's in the first round and people have this reaction to it. But like so many things in basketball, it is contextual, it is fun, it is beautiful in its own way. I mean, I was exhausted last night like I was after game 4 of the finals last year. I mean, I was like, what did I just watch? There was blood everywhere. It was incredible.
Yeah, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, and I'm gonna piss off Canada here. But let's assume that the Cavaliers move on to the second round just by going by, the favorite.
Careful. We might have to deep dive that series in a couple days.
Listen, I'm gonna be honest, Scotty. Like, no one champions Scotty Barnes like me. Like, just no one does. Okay, so I would be very excited. That would be a very cool matchup. I think he's one of the more exciting players to watch. I mean, I don't know how much we're going to talk about that series, but he's doing all kinds. He's switching on to Donovan Mitchell. He's just pushing the ball in transitions. He's incredible to watch, right? But let's pretend that the Cavaliers move on like most everyone expects, right? The Cavaliers Magic matchup, assuming the Magic move on, is going to be such a whiplash series, right? I don't even know what to expect. Like, I don't even know. Are the Magic going to be able to magic what they're doing against that kind of a team? Like, can they match up in a similar way? So I don't necessarily know if you can extrapolate anything that we're watching in this series to any other series. Like, I'm not sitting here at this point being like, oh my God, the Orlando Magic might make their way to the finals, right? Like, this might look terrible. They might revert back to what we've been seeing all season in the second round against somebody like the Cavs. So I don't know. Let's just look at it in isolation. This is a fun, like you said, 90s boxing match of a series with a bunch of very strong, spatially struggling players.
Yeah.
Challenged, that's the word I'm looking for. Challenged players. And you don't get to see many things like this in 2026. So appreciate it while it's happening.
But that's such a good point, Cody, because if that happens, it will only increase the calls for how disastrous Detroit is and all the problems with Cade and blah, 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 to be like, see, Orlando's a fraud. There is this sense of everyone is bad now in basketball. And we alluded to this the other day in an episode. And I can't remember if it was the episode with Jordan Dyer, but basically this idea that if you just keep looking for weaknesses in teams, then every team is going to be terrible real quickly, because there is no flawless team in the league right now. That is by design. The CBA has been put in to sort of prevent you from just easily going, I got 3 Hall of Famers here. Let me get a perfect role player there. Let me get a deep bench. You can't do that. And Oklahoma City is trying to cheat the system by just outmaneuvering everyone with draft picks and just picking superstars left and right and just having 22-year-old all-stars and things like that. But even Oklahoma City has some weaknesses, and we might see that depending on their matchups going down the road. But you can't do that.
Let me ask you a bigger question that might be on people's minds. I know we've talked about it in general about people are going to be down on the Pistons and they probably shouldn't be. In general, how have you felt about Cade in this series? What is your takeaway from the season that he had and we were very excited about?
I'm so sad to talk about this right now. I can't even deal with this. I think it was okay through the first 3 games, and last night in game 4, that was the first time I felt like he kind of let his teammates down, where just too many sloppy turnovers. Way too many sloppy turnovers in a game where we just talked about they just desperately needed the possessions, and he got another good game from their second best player, Tobias Harris. He got great effort from, my God, the effort in that game was, if they should show that to soldiers before they run into battle in France in World War II. That was, the effort in that game was absolutely ridiculous. Karis LeVert played well off the bench. Dennis Jenkins gives them solid minutes. We talked about Isaiah Stewart. So I felt like enough was there. It was the first time in the series where I was like, Cade, just a couple plays where he needed to find the right approach. Sometimes as a player that's talking to a coach, right? We talk about coaching adjustments. Sometimes as a player that's, hey, I want it over here. I want these guys. Let's try this. Something like that. So it's not disastrous for me, but it was really the first time that I was like, Cade, I'm kind of shocked.
There were two plays that really stand out to me, and I think there were two transition passes that he made. But Javonte Green steals the ball from Paolo Banchero at some time in the second quarter, and it's just a really tight, terrible spacing transition play. It might be a 3-on-2 opportunity. Cade's got in the middle. I know Duran's on his left here, and he just throws it way too hot to such a tight pass. And like I said, maybe the spacing was great. Maybe Jalen Duren should have slowed up and come from behind. At the end of the day, it was a bad pass that led to, a turnover off a great Javonte Green play. And then later on, there's another transition play. I think about 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Maybe a little bit later than that, but I think he has Javonte Green ahead of him, and he throws the bounce pass in transition, hits him right in the shins. Right, yeah. He has no chance to make that catch, and this is a guy that we've been singing the praise for his passing chops throughout the entire season, throwing out around the Jason Kidd comparison, which honestly this looks like a 2002 Nets team in terms of spacing anyway. But yeah, I agree with you. Like the passing accuracy and the decision making in some of those opportunities just weren't there last night, and I just don't know if it's like an overload of what he's trying to do for them. Like, Tobias Harris is like the second best player, like you said, joking. I don't even know if you're joking at this point. He's shooting 14% from three.
Wait, I'm not sure. That's dead serious. Who would their second best player be?
Asar Thompson's still making some pretty tremendous defensive plays.
Asar Thompson? Wow.
Like, he's still making some pretty tremendous plays, dude. Like, defensively, like, yeah, sure, the spacing is cratered offensively when he's out there, but he's still materializing and doing his thinky stuff when he's out there. Tobias Harris is shooting 14% from three, and I know he's getting out in transition, and he has this little like, I'm going to be Carmelo Anthony for a play here and do a turnaround jumper over Jalen Suggs. So that's nice. I don't know if I would say second best player.
He's the two best games I think I've ever seen him play, and Asar Thompson. In the offseason, we need to have a serious conversation because one, I do not think you can play players like this with centers. They are the center. Mm-hmm. And then you have to really find a way to sort of manipulate the roster around a center like that, because the center's not 7 feet tall and he's not a traditional shot blocker, and he can't just play drop coverage against centers. He's 6'5" or 6'6" or whatever he is. And so this may be one of our biggest disagreements ever, because I think he is a massive negative on like a massive negative on offense right now.
He's definitely a negative on offense, but defensively, he's still
ginormous. Okay. Ginormous.
Yeah. What other synonyms can you throw out there? What else is there? Well, I want to bring up this could be a final thing. We don't want to do the whole thing biblical,
terrestrial.
We don't want to do the whole thing on this series. But somebody in the comments brought up Franz's calf, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Franz Wagner played in the fourth quarter last night. I think he leaves the game and he has a bothered calf strain. So if he's actually out, that does swing things for them, because he is pretty significant for what they're able to do.
Okay, let's talk about Nikola Jokic and his series against Rudy Gobert. First of all, I would like to I need help. I'm going to get on the couch and I'm going to ask everyone listening for some personal therapy in the comments. Does anyone remember anything that's happened in this series? Was this series always on late at night after like 12 other crazy games have happened? Am I making that up? I cannot. This series is a blur, but I've watched every single game. It doesn't make sense to me.
I know when they're in Minnesota, I thought there was a game that started at 7:30. It was maybe on Saturday when all of the games were shifted up, and I think the last game was at 7:30 or 7 o'clock or something like that. But beyond that, if it's a weeknight, they're like, yes, a weeknight. Let's put it at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, where the Minnesota Timberwolves are. It's terrible. Like, what are you doing to us? Like, you again, I called it. You cannot have this game at the Monday night slot at 9:30. I powered through. I watched the first half, and I didn't even get a good game out of it. So, I agree with you. This is nonsense. Let's move the Wolves to the East, and then they can have a nicer time to start.
I guess I'm asking you before I give some thoughts specifically on Gobert and Jokic. I guess I'm asking you if you have a sense of what has happened in this series. Like what like game one, all of my notes, game one might've been an afternoon game. And I felt comfortable. I watched game one and I was like, I got it. I got a lot of 2-man action. My biggest note was the Wolves are letting Denver get into the 2-man action in so many different ways. How is this going to work? And then Jaden McDaniels after the game was like, we're going to win game two. And I was like, I've heard that music before. And they came out and won game two. I was like, okay, this is what these teams do. They played each other 30 times, 15 up, 15 down. That's how this works. And then the Wolves won game 3 and Gobert was like maybe even better in game 3 and Jokic was getting worse. And that's usually never happens with Jokic. Even guys who figure out Jokic and Gobert has given him a hard time. We talked about this in past series. Then Jokic kind of finds his rhythm. He finds his touch. He finds his space. He's like a boxer. He figures out the right spot to get for you. And that didn't happen at all. And then it was 2-1. And then game 4, Minnesota was like, what if we just didn't have a backcourt? They're like, we don't want our backcourt starters to play anymore. No more Dante DiVincenzo. Oh, that was such a tough loss. And then Ant, who is historically been very young and very bionic. So hopefully he's back in a couple weeks and, his normal self and whatnot. But they're just like, let's just not have a backcourt. And we've talked about this Minnesota team before as well, where it's like, okay, yeah, Anthony Edwards is not in the lineup. You better watch out because all of a sudden Jaden McDaniels and Julius Randle and Ayo Dosunmu and some of these guys, their eyes get really, really wide. And then it's 3-1. And then there were no backcourt players last night. And that game felt like it got away from Minnesota real fast. And then at the end of the game, Jaden McDaniels in the press conference goes, yeah, it's okay. We're going to win the next game. I don't know what to make of this series, basically.
So, okay. First of all, I want to start somewhere. When people contextualize this and talk about how great Rudy Gobert's been and how much success they've had, and then you get the podcasters and people are on there and they say nobody loved the Gobert trade, I just want everyone to come back here. I want you to find the podcast. I think it's in 2022, in the middle of July.
Yes.
I want you to listen to Ben and I talk about that trade.
Well, not Ben. Don't listen to what I said about the trade. Listen to Cody.
I was very, very excited about this trade because Rudy Gobert is a generational defensive player. Mm-hmm. He has been the best player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think since Anthony Edwards has been injured, even in the regular season, you could say he has been the best and most impactful player for the Wolves, and he's just carried it into these playoffs, right? So I think you definitely have to start with just how dominant he's been, both one-on-one with Jokic, because I think strategically that's always the thing that we talked about with these Nuggets series. I think the Lakers Nuggets also have like a history. I don't remember any of the years, but when they were like, oh, we're going to put Rui on Jokic so Anthony Davis can hang out by the basket and do some stuff here. It's the same sort of thing last year and the last couple of years where it's like, we're going to put Karl Anthony Towns when he was on the Wolves. We're going to put him on Jokic so that Gobert can hang out by the rim and roam around and do some destructive stuff. And I think that's been the best success you've seen from Jokic. But Gobert's straight up taking the one-on-one challenge like it's Hakeem and Shaq in the finals in the 90s or something like that. David Robinson and Hakeem out there, just like, hey, mano y mano, let's see what we're going to do here. So all the flowers in the world for what Rudy Gobert is able to do as he's going up in years. And honestly, as people are kind of writing him off as still being one of the 3, 4, 5 best defensive players in the league.
Rudy Gobert defensively is, if you've seen Victor Wembanyama play, he's basically Victor Wembanyama with a little less mobility and a little less length. That's what he is. I think he's a pretty good defender. What do you think?
Rudy Gobert?
Yes, you've heard of him, Rudy Gobert.
I think he plays defense well once in a while. Yeah.
Just the way people talk about him is wild.
It's terrible.
But you hit on something that I think is probably the key here, which is you don't have to double team, right? Mm-hmm. So if you play him straight up, if you play Jokic straight up and you take away his ability to sort of play the pick your poison game. Hey, if I have to send a double team, he's going to make the right pass and carve you up. Even if Cam Johnson isn't shooting as well as Michael Porter Jr., then this is something that takes away one half of Denver's great potent offense. Or he can score. But Gobert just takes away the whole equation, in addition to playing really well against Jamal Murray in the two-man actions in the middle of the court, where this is maybe the most interesting sub wrinkle of this dynamic in this series. Gobert's like, yeah, Jokic, you can take 15 threes if you want. And Jokic is like, but I really, really don't want to take 15 threes. And also, I don't even trust my 3-ball right now. And it's hard to say what is happening with Jokic. Before his knee injury, he was playing at probably the highest level he's ever played. And after his knee injury, he's never come back to that. But his mobility is pretty good. So did he just lose his touch? Because I'm seeing him miss shots that I never see him miss. But also there is precedent for Rudy Gobert bothering these shots and starting to get in your head with the timing and the rhythm and the stunts and things like that, little jabs at the ball. And all of a sudden you're going down the lane and you think you have a layup and it's blocked because he's so long. So yes, to your point about loving the trade, he has been the MVP of this series, and it has been game-changing, literally, in addition to the fact that the Nuggets don't have their third and fourth best players, and the supporting players haven't been great and stuff like that. But that's where my brain keeps going back to, maybe because these games are on so late at night.
And defensively, you have to shout out Jaden McDaniels too, because he's picking up Jamal Murray, 94 feet. He looks like a pterodactyl. It's the closest thing that we've seen to Tayshaun Prince, like in this century. Like, no one does that. He had a chase down block. I'm pretty sure he was looking down the rim at one point. That might have been in the previous game before last night, but he's been everywhere. And I think he bothers people. Like, if he comes to help you in the paint and Gobert's there, and then you see Jaden McDaniels also coming down, that's a lot of pressure to go against. But that's not it for Jaden McDaniels, because those three balls kind of left him. He was much more efficient in the regular season. We see the last couple of years he's been hovering actually closer to 40%. That drops down quite a bit in the playoffs. But actually, one takeaway I've had offensively in this series is that, especially when they're at full strength with Dante the Inferno DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards, is they just have more guys that can do stuff off the catch. Right? Like, you kick it around, you hit it to Naz Reid, he can knock down the three. He has multiple plays where he can put it on the deck and finish. Jaden McDaniels, the three's not going there, but he's so long and athletic that he puts the ball on the deck once, he's at the basket and he's throwing it down on you. Dante, like I said, he fires without a conscience. That hurts them quite a bit. Anthony Edwards has got the pull-up three going, the spot-up three. All of these guys. Mike Conley's a deadly three-point shooter, and he's being dusted off from the bench. It's just like, all right, I'll roll out here as a former all-star pick and do my thing here. So when you compare and contrast what the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth guys are able to do when they're actually getting the ball in action, the Wolves are just outpacing the Nuggets completely in that situation. So I think that's something that I keep going back to, is like their spot-up ability is just so much more creative and varied than what the Nuggets have been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, according to the fancy camera tracking, that Gobert has guarded Jokic on like over 100 possessions in this series, and they've doubled less than 10% of the time. So over 90% of the time, it's just Rudy without an extra double that needs to come. And then you start looking at the efficiency numbers in the regular season when Jokic was in primary actions, 124 offensive rating for the Denver Nuggets, 124 offensive rating. When he's guarded by Gobert in this series, it goes down to 112. So your eyes are not deceiving you. The stats are not deceiving you. Jokic's scoring numbers themselves, I mean, they're a reflection of his lack of ability to really pressure the Timberwolves defense holistically. I have it after 5 games as 23 points per 75 on true shooting percentage, 3 percentage points worse than what the Timberwolves gave up in the regular season to opponents. And the turnover numbers aren't great either. That can be a sneaky one in a small series. We just talked about it with Cade, that sometimes fans, one way or the other, kind of overlook turnovers, be either good or bad. And so I think Gobert has been fantastic.
We haven't said another name that we probably should. I don't know if you and JD talked. By the way, JD did a great job on the pod. It was great hearing him come from Sacred Heart Hospital to drop some knowledge about basketball. But I think the IO game, did that happen after he was on here? I think that was the Saturday night game, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. We should probably talk about the fact that Ayo Dosunmu dropped 42, 43 off the bench.
Yeah,
right?
43 points, yeah.
You lose 2 of your starters, 2 of the main offensive guys. It's like, all right, I'm just going to fill in. And I think something that he's able to do that we've seen a major weakness from Jokic here is that Jokic defending in space has been really problematic for him in this series. Right? Anthony Edwards was able to take advantage of it when he was healthy earlier on, and Ayo Dosunmu is definitely taking advantage of it. When he's streaking, his change of pace, his change of direction, his ability to be like Pascal Siakam, where he's just constantly assaulting the rim, has been really, really difficult for the Nuggets to defend, especially without their main defensive organizer and Aaron Gordon to put things together. So shout out to him for just stepping up and being a monster for the Timberwolves.
Wouldn't you say in general, based on that Gordon point, that the infrastructure around Jokic has been a little weaker defensively in this series? And more importantly, the way Minnesota attacks has always done this to him. This has always been a two-way mismatch for him. Going back to 2023 when they won the title, it didn't look great. You and I were wondering what was going on with the wrist and things like that. This Minnesota team has always done it on, we talked about one end, but now we talk about the defensive end. And we've also had this conversation about Jokic, which gets back to the bad matchups thing and gets back to the sort of conversations that start to go into people's brains. And I don't just mean people who are bad actors on the internet, who are a very small number of people who are saying, Nikola Jokic isn't good anymore, making a lot of noise. I don't believe that that's a large number of people. I don't believe there's any evidence for that. It's just these are the people that are trying to get attention, drawing these crazy conclusions. But for people who are earnestly looking at this and who are honestly saying like, yeah, this is not good for Jokic, what's going on, got to remember this is what always happens with Minnesota, because the way they attack side to side downhill, that's the way this offense likes to attack, a lot of side to side downhill with speed.
Mm-hmm.
This is not great for him. Whereas if you can put him in a series where we saw it like against Oklahoma City last year, if he's in a series where he can use his mind and positioning and move in different places, feints, stunts, jabs, positions, zones, hybrid zones, switches, trap the ball and then recover. And when you trap the ball and recover, there's these very regimented rotational ideas for what the offense is trying to do around one pick and roll player. That is a very different looking thing for Jokic. And so we've talked about the fact that Jokic is a defensive player that in some matchups and in some series actually looks like a good defender. Not like okay, not like not great, but not bad. Like he actually has positive defensive impact and positive defensive games because of his strengths, but he also has weaknesses. And when you put him up against Minnesota, those weaknesses are amplified. And so in game 5, when Minnesota was back in Denver and they didn't have their starting backcourt, one of the things I heard after the game, I saw some Nuggets fan be like, Jokic looked a lot more rested tonight and a lot better defensively. It's like, yeah, Anthony Edwards and Donte DiVincenzo weren't coming downhill at him. So that's going to help his offense. That's going to help this sort of two-way effect. And I think it's just yet another fascinating example, Cody, of how we look at a particular outcome and we don't think about whether that's a good matchup or a bad matchup or any of the other sort of nuanced variables that go into, what leads to these incredible legacy building playoff things that we talk about so much.
That would be a really interesting project, to be able to go back and find like the bad matchups that some of the best players of all time went through. Obviously, you can go back to 2004 Pistons and Lakers and what they were able to do to Kobe and how they were able to, they didn't super slow down Shaq. He still put up some numbers, but their system was very well put together for that. And obviously the Lakers had all kinds of issues then, but these kinds of the Dallas Mavericks 2000.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. LeBron James,
2007 Dallas Mavericks against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Right. So these like very specific matchups where in that case, it's a former coach. They have a very weird style of play, that Mavericks team for that time, just playing a ton of small players. So they exist, right? They're out there. And I think it's really interesting. It's part of what makes the NBA playoffs so fun and part of what makes this tournament so crazy right now. You're going to go from one round to the next round, and we expect these kinds of style make fights. That was our whole preview, man. My whole thing on the preview was like, you were like, who's going to win? And I'm like, well, it depends on which of the permutations we get, because I really do think these matchups look very different based on who is on the other side of half court when you step out there.
Mm-hmm. And what you were talking about with Jokic, there's something I wanted to bring up. I don't know if we talked about it in the Thinkies, though that always goes way longer than you can bring up extra topics. But I've had this idea of like defensive stability, right? So you bring up this idea. It's like, in some matchups, Jokic has some good value. In other matchups like this, it's clearly a negative value. And I almost think when you think about defensive players, you want to think about like, all right, here are all the possible matchups where he would be a strong, like plus defender. Here are the ones where it would be negatives. And there's some of the best defensive players, right? Like Victor Wembanyama, there's just no evidence that he would be a negative in any kind of offensive matchup, right? Like Scotty Barnes, somebody like that, peak Draymond Green. Like these are players that have a very high defensive stability where it's like, I can't really imagine like this player like really struggling against a person. Peak Drew Holiday, who's also just like, I'm just going to guard Victor Wembanyama right now. Like we have Donovan Clingan, who's basically the closest size to Victor Wembanyama in the league. And yet me as the point guard, I'm going to go out there and be like, hey, watch what I can do out here. We've seen him guard Embiid in stretches, especially when it was with Boston. The Hawks series, when Giannis goes down back in 2021, he's guarding John Collins. Like you just have these guys where it's like, it doesn't matter what offense you're going to come at. You're not going to knock down the defensive value that I'm bringing.
Can we talk about this? I was really waiting for you. I don't know if you listened to the entire last episode we recorded, but I was
did.
really waiting for you to come back, and I was like, oh my God, it's the Cody signal is being blasted into the night sky right now. Like he's Bruce Wayne. We got to get him here to talk about this. Drew Holiday guarding Victor Wembanyama with some modicum of success, but it's just a fascinating idea where you turn on the game and you've got these two dudes that are at least like 7'2", 7'3". Klingon's giant, Donovan Klingon for the Portland Trailblazers. And Klingon is guarding the Spurs point guard, basically, Steph Castle. And the Blazers point guard is guarding 7'4", 7'6", Victor Wembanyama. And then like they're running screens and they don't want to, you're like, wait a second, make sure our center doesn't guard their center. Make sure our short person doesn't guard their short person. So yeah. Do you have any more thoughts on that? It was just an incredible thing to see. And while we're here, we might as well briefly check in on those two games with the Spurs where they felt like the exact same game. One game, I think they were down 15 and end up having this 45-15 run. And then in game 4, they were down 19 and they came back and, got an even bigger lead. So an even bigger run. Very, very similar feeling games from San Antonio and just these really funky, weird matchups.
I want to ask one more thing about Denver, Minnesota in a second, but just my overall Drew point that I want to make, just historically speaking here, right? Like, obviously, we have the big upset in the first round, 2018. They knock out the Blazers when he just punishes Damian Lillard out there. Gets traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in 21, puts him over the edge, wins a championship. Guess what happens when he gets traded to Boston for the 24 season? Puts him over the edge.
The title, yeah.
Wins a championship, right? 26 goes to Portland. I don't know what people are thinking about the Trailblazers. They make the playoffs, and they at least won a game in the first round. So, I'm just saying that, believe it or not, like even if you're not a knockdown shooter or some of those numbers go down in the playoffs, if you're an incredibly stable defensive player, you're strong, you can do a bunch of stuff there, you're a fantastic passer. I just pull down a Blazers game, like the stuff that he's able to do to push the pace and just organize what they're doing. Scoot, okay, we'll get to Scoot in a second, but Scoot doesn't have to worry about playmaking for people when Drew Holiday is just like kicking ahead and throwing lobs and stuff like that. And you also just have a guy that's like, oh, okay, I have a mismatch. I'm going to take you in the paint and get a nice little turnaround shot here. That's just extremely valuable stuff. That's very, very underlooked. And to a similar extent, Marcus Smart is doing the same thing for the Lakers. If you're a very good passer, if you're a sturdy defender, and if you're just out there playing with like a high IQ, you're going to make a monster impact in the playoffs. And these guys just seem to always be undervalued more than they should be when we get to the second season.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Can I ask you if let me transition myself to this final transition for the Nuggets? Who are they playing? The Timberwolves.
I had one more Spurs thought.
Oh, okay.
Which was, we talk about what Victor Wembanyama does defensively, right? Mm-hmm. To me, I don't know if it was just because Drew switched onto him. I'll have to rewatch some of the possessions. But once they made that change in game 4, which halfway through, 8 minutes left in the second quarter, something like that, we got a lot more Drew Holiday matched up on Wemby. Wemby just started to have more and more offensive gravity. And the way he warps the court, the way he starts to mess with you on the lobs, on the roll behinds, on things like that, it really opens up stuff that is not obvious necessarily when you're watching. But it just, when the Spurs have that thing going, when it's Wemby and those 4 dudes, and they can be different dudes, but it's like, they just feel like they keep Fox, Castle, Devin Vassell is stroking it. How did Julian Champagny get open in the corner? Here comes Dylan Harper. This is like 4 dudes, right? It's not another big. It's not Jason Tatum at the power forward. They're just rotating people who are big and athletic and wingy. I said they're not big. You know what I'm trying to say, Cody? They're not like 6'9" power forwards is what I'm saying. Yep. And the fact that on offense, he also demands so much attention in so many situations down the lane helps the finishers when they get in the paint, but it helps pull in defense for the shooters as well. And that game in game 4 was just, there was some ridiculous offensive gravity. And we're in my notes. I was like, what is this like Steph Curry meets Shaquille O'Neal? What? I don't understand. There's like a really weird, crazy thing going on.
That's what I was just about to say, is physically in the same sort of attention. It's the same thing as Shaq, right? Where even if you don't have the shooters necessary to space the floor that way. He just brings in so much to the paint that you're forcing everyone in to then have to recover and do things. So that latent value that we talk so much about that these best players of all time bring to the table, he just has by reason of his being massive and having great touch and having a great motor, moving around and finding good positions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's very clearly on full display, and it definitely opens up the game for these guys like Fox, Harper, Castle, who aren't as comfortable spotting up and hitting threes. So Dylan Harper, you gotta be very excited about your Dylan Harper excitement during these playoffs so far.
I'm trying to keep it together. Before we get out of here, can I ask you? I'm just looking at the date and the time and all this stuff. Do you want to do an all first round team now, or do you want it because we're going to be in the second round next week when you come back? We may record another episode in between them, but I mean, you and I have to do an all first round team if we're going to do one. I can't do this with someone else. That would be like cheating on you.
First of all, okay, let me ask you my final Nuggets Wolves question.
Sorry, right. I keep pushing that aside.
So the Wolves are now up 3-2. They're missing Anthony Edwards. They're missing Dante DiVincenzo. And I know everyone could get excited about a 3-1 lead, but Mike Conley, of all people, can say, like Elrond, he's like, I was there 3,000 years ago. Like, I know what this dark magic can do when they're down 3-1. He misses, famously, I think in the bubble, misses the game winner after when he's playing for Utah. The Nuggets come back and beat them in a 7-game series. What do you think about the ending of this series? Are the Wolves going to pull it off, hampered at this point, or are the Nuggets going to come back and win this series?
Why are you doing this to me right now? Why do we even need to?
It's the question. It's the question on maybe not on everyone's mind, but it's on my mind. So I have a microphone. I get to ask it.
Is it weird that I don't care about this question? Do you feel that way?
I don't know what you mean about not caring.
Well, who is in the next round? San Antonio Spurs.
Yes.
Do you feel good about either of these teams going up against the San Antonio Spurs?
Okay, I'm just going to talk. I don't know. If Anthony Edwards isn't going to be healthy,
he's not going to be. Come on, there's no way he's going to play at least the beginning of the series. Come on,
is that cruel of me? Like, I don't know. I think it would be better to get the Nuggets to the next round just for that matchup. Like, if it was healthy Timberwolves and we saw it everything had, and Dante and Edwards were super healthy, then great. Let's get them to the second round. But like, don't you kind of think the Spurs would just wipe the floor with them? I also said that before the series, so I have no idea. I don't know.
No. I'm okay. It's possible, I suppose, for Denver to do what Orlando is doing to some degree and just flip some weird. I mean, this is why athletics are so fun, right? You don't always really know. Sometimes weird stuff happens, or sometimes there's the potential for something to happen. With Orlando, at least we said this is a team that's really talented, but they're ready to go home. And now all of a sudden, what's going on? It's a similar thing with Denver, where we talked a lot in the second half of the season about how Denver started to concern me and what was going on there. And to me, that's all we're seeing. And so is it possible that they can all of a sudden switch into playoff mode like they did last year against Oklahoma City if they get to the next round and they're healthy, right? I don't know if Peyton Watson's coming back. I don't know what's going on with Peyton Watson. Is he coming back?
I have no clue.
I don't know.
Not a clue.
Okay, so if you get back Peyton Watson, you get back Aaron Gordon, and all of a sudden, could something happen? Maybe, but I'm just saying I'm not really thinking about who's going to win this series because right now, neither of these teams look very big picture to me based on what we're seeing.
I will say it would be really fun to see Gobert go against Wemby, right? I think Gobert is on, especially if they finish this off, he's going to be really high on himself as he should be. And, you have the French connection there. I think that would be an exciting matchup, I think, to see defensively. So if that's something to root for, yeah, that's actually pretty cool if you get the Timberwolves there. All right, you want to talk about a possible first team?
Yeah, I'm just curious if we did an all first round team right now, who would be on it for you? I want positions. I want positions.
Okay.
None of this
absolutely
positionless nonsense.
For sure, I think the lock of locks is Shea. Yeah, he's obviously first team.
Yeah.
I think prior to game 4, LeBron was going to be a lock of locks too, but that was a pretty pitiful performance. But if they save it and they win 4-1 in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? And he looks great. So I think LeBron is pretty close.
Yep. I would agree. I would agree with that. you can't use averages always in these very small series because it's like tennis. It doesn't matter if you lose the game 40-love or you go into 10 deuces. You lost a game. It doesn't matter if you lose a set 6-0 or 7-6. That's how it works in tennis, by the way, Cody. You have to get to 6 games before you win what's called
I played tennis.
Set. Okay,
once upon a
right.
time. Yeah, I know
All
that
right.
sport a little. I wasn't very good.
For new listeners, Cody doesn't know anything about any other sports. So anytime I try to make a reference, we have to explain the basic rules to him. So I completely agree because in his case, having one night off after the overtime game, you expect a pretty big letdown at 41 years old. Now he's got 2 nights off to go to the next game. So to your point, if you get a total stinker, you get it out of the way, you come back, you play well. Probabilistically, that is not the same thing as just whatever averages are destroyed by that game 4 performance. So I would say LeBron as well. Then do you have any other locks? Who else would you?
Okay, so in the same vein, Wemby missed a game.
He did miss a game,
but he's tremendous, right? Like, would you say that there's 5 players better than Wemby in these playoffs when he's been playing?
No, I would not.
So even though Gobert is having a generational defensive series against Jokic and he's playing all these games and stuff, I think you got to go Wemby, right?
Okay. So that leaves 2 spots. 2 spots. Do you want me to name some candidates?
Can I say a player? I don't know if he's going to make it, but I've been really excited every time I've watched him play.
Yeah, please.
I can't get OG Anunoby.
Oh, I was going to actually name him.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. He's making, clutch 3-point shots across the board. He's attacking off the catch. Defensively, he's doing everything that they need to plug up holes. He's grabbing offensive rebounds. He's just massive. I know Karl-Anthony Towns statistically, I think has the better case, and people will look at Brunson's handling in the pick and roll and stuff like that. But there's something about what OG is doing during this series that I can't get away from. I can't get away from what he's doing. I don't know if he's a first team performer, but he is an excellent basketball player that is having a great playoffs.
Can I throw another one out there? How about Scotty Barnes?
Oh my God. What about Scotty Barnes?
Well, I'm just thinking that maybe he would, be on our whole first round team.
I think he's got to be pretty close if he's not. Because again, defensively,
got to be first or second team.
Donovan, locking up Donovan Mitchell, taking the big men in the post. Like there are times, the way that he's able to push the ball offensively just scatters the Cavaliers a good amount. So I think he's bringing it on both ends. I know people might look at the true shooting percentage and the 3-point shots and whatever else. Like, oh, he's not a first option. Look at all of the things that he's doing out there. So I think Barnes is a very good candidate. So let's pencil him as a candidate.
I have him penciled in. Yeah.
Okay.
Can't. I have one more. There's a couple more candidates, but there's one I really want to ask you about. What about our old friend Jaylen Brown?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time with the Celtics team.
I know. But his defense, his shot making. There's a great irony because JD loves the Celtics. That's his team. And I think when we talked about the Celtics last week, I said Jaylen Brown came in and he saved this game 3 in the fourth quarter. His stats are really good. He's had a good defensive series, really good defensive series. So that's a lot. When he's on the court, the Celtics are outscoring the 76ers by 12 points per 100. Of course, they're outscoring him by more when he's on the bench, which always, I don't know how to explain this. But the thing we left out was Jordan Walsh in the last couple of games has come in and just completely been a defensive weapon. And now you start to see like he changed that fourth quarter as well. They brought Walsh in emergency matchup with Tyrese Maxey and just completely shut off Tyrese Maxey's water. And so now we get the sense of what's going on in the playoffs. Teams are scoring less. We're trying to find the right rotations. It's super, super physical. Certain actions aren't working. There's a lot of switch hunting that we expect, of course. And you start to look at different teams and you go, okay, what are the different lineups I can use in different matchups? And to see that from Jordan Walsh and realize like, oh, that's like a defensive weapon, right? Mm-hmm. That's a legitimate defensive weapon that Boston can use in other series at certain points of time in this postseason. I thought that was a nice development for them, in addition to what we've talked about with Baylor Shireman and Peyton Pritchard doing his thing and stuff like that. So to me, I think the Celtic I would pick would be Jaylen Brown. Tatum has been pretty good overall as well.
Mm-hmm. But I think if you have to pick someone, it would probably be Jaylen Brown.
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's not easy. So, okay. So do you have any other more candidates you want to discuss? Do you want to, put a Marcus Smart, a Chet Holmgren,
I was gonna say, yeah. What about Chet? How are you feeling about Chet Holmgren? Because he looks pretty. I mean, they just swept. They're the only team that sweeps. Like, we can't brush aside the fact that they swept a team, especially a very well coached team. You know, I love the fact that after the series, there's a lot of nice things going out there. I think Booker called Shea the best player. I think Shea was being like, Dylan Brooks is a killer out there. He's awesome. Blah blah blah. I love this. I love the camaraderie. I know people want to get at each other's throats, but you know what? No, let's be kind to each other. That's pretty cool to me. So I think Chet, if I had to pick a second person from the Thunder, it would be him.
Well, you could put him on the second team.
Okay.
Yeah, Wemby's our center on the first team.
What about Donovan Mitchell? How do you feel about him?
What about him?
I'm just looking at this series. He's probably my pick for the Cavaliers.
Yeah, I'm not feeling enough. I'm not feeling enough there to get him on my first team from the other guys we mentioned.
Karl Anthony Towns, but
yeah,
he's a center.
Yeah, Karl Anthony Towns has been good. I would consider him for the second team, probably. I don't know. I think, we mentioned Tatum. I think we've mentioned the guys that need to be mentioned.
You know what? I'm gonna hit the buzzer. Paul. We didn't say Paul George. I don't know if he's up there, but he's been fun. This is great.
So is Maxey. Yeah.
I think Shea, LeBron, Wemby, Barnes and Brown. That's probably what I'm going to lock in right now.
Let's do it. That's going to be our. I'm glad we did this while you were here.
Yeah, the thing is, there's like these 2-2 series. Like, we're halfway through the series at this point. Like, anything can happen at this point.
Don't worry.
What if I don't know, RJ Barrett averages 50 points a game for the next couple games and gets up there?
That's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's just support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's where we have our extra playoff videos and extra content. Patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. You can also get them on YouTube. We should have done that in the post show, Cody. That should have been our whole post show. It should have been the first team all playoff team without finishing the actual first round. Only one series is over, right?
Yeah.
I would like to thank because the problem is with the schedule. I'm pretty certain by the time we record next week that almost every series will be done. I think that's the challenge.
Well, listen,
we'll be in the second round.
It's not like we submitted a ballot that's going to like swing anything here. Like, if we need to amend anything, we can come back and figure that out.
You're saying like if we had a rookie of the year vote, for instance, and we just waited to watch some play-in games, and then we said, "Oh, the guy that made the play-in, I want to change my vote." Is that what you're saying?
I legitimately, as a non-voter, like, it actually really makes me angry if anyone weighed anything that happened in the play-in games for any of their votes.
They did this. A number of voters have said they did this.
If that factored in, like, I genuinely think that's just wrong. That is not a correct way to view it. And I don't see how you could make an argument that's like, hey, I'm going to change my vote for a guy that made it to the play-in when we didn't even see somebody else that made the play-in, so we don't have the counterfactual. It's insanity to me. That's such a, I don't know, man. I think it's malpractice in terms of voting.
Yeah, well, you're also not supposed to incorporate those games into your voting, but because of the extenuating circumstances this year of the injuries and the 65-game rule and things like that, they had to hold the ballots for an extra week. I mean, I guess they didn't have to hold the ballots. They could have submitted votes and amended, or said, here, I'm going to give you 17 players instead of 15. And if Luka and whatever are eligible, then bump them up. They could have done that, but they asked everyone instead to wait. And by waiting, they allowed Con Knipple to probably lose Rookie of the Year. It's pretty funny. I know you're upset about it, but
yeah, I'm very upset about that. That's ridiculous. Whatever. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have a vote. I think it would be too stressful, and I get so worked up about this kind of stuff. I'm not sure. What else is there to talk about? Is there any side conversations about the NBA otherwise that we can have?
Side conversations?
Last time we talked about Drew Holiday and the toothpick, not toothpick. I don't know if there was a similar conversation to be had. The
blood. the blood from last night. I always thought you were supposed to stop the game and get a Band-Aid. You had to come out of the game because of the blood. It's been in place since Magic Johnson in 1991 and all the problems with just having open wounds for sanitary reasons and things like that. And they were just, I mean, the best part was it happened to Desmond Bane, who's like, let it bleed. You know what I mean? He's like, don't wipe it, get it all over my arm, get it on my shoes, get it on everyone's uniform. It's blood sport.
I have an anecdote about this. I was I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to even say years that it was, but I was in practice for basketball once upon a time when I was younger, and I got hit and I was bleeding a little bit. There was blood, and I paused. And I was like, "Coach, can I get like a Band-Aid or something?" And the coach laughed at me. He's like, "Oh, you feeling some kind of pain?" I'm like, "I'm bleeding. This is the middle of practice. Like, I don't want to get blood on people." And he like laughed it off. I remember this so well. So I'm like, this is one of the most toxic coaching moments that I've probably ever witnessed. And I just think about it sometimes. I'm like, I can't imagine telling an athlete to be like, it's okay that you're bleeding. Go out there and have fun.
Two things, Cody. One, I love the olden days. That's a great story. Two, I made a Heat reference earlier. It went over your head. We're gonna put that on your docket.
Oh no, what happened?
Let It Bleed is a Heat reference.
Oh my
God. You'll get it later. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking about my anecdote so much I didn't even.
That's a great story. That made my day. I love that. Where was the wound?
It was on my hand. It was like one of those that like caught a scratch and like the part of your body that touches the basketball a good amount.
Yeah.
It was just hand, like blood all over my hand.
I remembered, I had a memory that was just resuscitated recently, was when Wemby had his concussion. I realized I was playing in a game once and I was playing against this guy who was enormous. He was like 6'3", might have been 300 pounds. He was a football player. He was enormous. Okay. And he clocked me with an elbow, like grabbed the rebound, spin the torso, just completely clocked me. And I was kind of like not knocked out, but like on the deck, and then kind of stumbling around to try to get back on. I remember getting back up, trying to get back on defense. They were playing 5-on-4, and like the gym is spinning. I have stars. The gym is spinning. And I just go down there, and I'm watching the Wemby play, and I'm thinking of this play like back in the 20th century, back in the days or whatever. I'm like, there's no way anyone was taking me out of the game because I got elbowed in the head. They were mad that I didn't get up fast enough. And I was like, you guys don't understand. My legs didn't work. I was trying to get up as fast as possible. There's the night and day full circle we've done on concussions and head injuries in sports is wild. That just never, ever would have been a thing in the 20th century.
No, concussion protocol. I don't even know when that started, but that was certainly not like a phrase that was used very often in the past. It's not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not trying to be like these kids are weak nowadays. It's probably good that we're watching people's brains. Yeah. So that's great.
What are you saying? We should get the Coliseum up and running again and get some gladiators in there. And
I'm sure Kelsey's already all over that one.
I was going to say, I think we're trending toward that. We should get out of here before we give anyone any ideas. That's it for this. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be back soon. And of course, we hope you are really enjoying the craziness of these playoffs and that you are having a great day.